To the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And of course, I start the program that way every day as a good indication that the United States Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, are an important part of the shtick of tall tales, something we talk about a lot. The United States Constitution, the rule of law, and related subjects, a little bit of politics, a little bit of social commentary, that sort of thing. If you are a first-time listener, you're in for a rare treat. You are now tuned in to the top-rated FM afternoon radio talk show in the Western Pacific. So we'll take you on a 2-hour ride on the good ship Tall Tales. We'll be pulling back into port about 1800. I think you're going to enjoy every minute of the ride. First item on the calendar here is Zemi Ikotny. And in Zemi Ikotny, I examine the editorial pages of our two daily newspapers, see if I can find something that looks like an editorial on each one, read the editorials, analyze them, look for grammatical and English usage mistakes, errors in logic and theory, factual errors, etc. Having gone through that, I then will award the coveted blue star to the better of the two editorials, which almost always is the Guam Daily Post, because the Daily News seldom runs local editorials. They would much prefer to run boilerplate from USA Today or Gannett News Service instead of running something that has local importance. Today is no different. Oh yes, it's usually boilerplate from USA Today or Gannett News Service. 9 out of 10 times it is Trump bashing. Today is no different. The title of the editorial is Defund the GOP. Borrowing a page from Black Lives Matter. Defund the GOP and join Romney to save it. Save it from guess who? So much for the Daily News. I'm going to, as has been happening recently, since the Daily News editorial is such a bust, I'm going to come back to a substitute in a moment, but I'm going to do the Post first. The Post says, editorials, as you were, employers and workers in a struggle for economic survival need to see elected officials lead. The economy is a source of livelihood for tens of thousands of Guam residents. We don't need to wait for an official gauge of just how bad a turn it has taken. All we need to do is look around and hear the struggles of employers and workers they once employed. There's a growing number of small to large-scale businesses that will not be able to recover from this pandemic. This means fewer jobs will be available. On the small business level, one of the more recent examples, Java Junction, right downtown in the heart of Agania in what we used to refer to as Times Square. Did you know that, Real Joe Cruz?
No, I didn't.
That part of town is known as Times Square.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, the road that diagonals up to Mighty from right behind Java Junction, that road that cuts a diagonal.
Yeah.
That road at one time was blocked off until a man named Scambaluri came along and opened it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's Scambaluri property in there.
Okay.
And right there in Times Square. So let's see. One of the small business on the small business level, one of the more recent examples is Java Junction, a landmark and go-to for office workers and students in Hagåtña. The business environment was already starting to slow in the area at the beginning of the year, and then the pandemic dealt the family-owned business and many others like it a blow that's impossible to overcome. Quote, at some point, if you're not making money, and that's since March, if we depend on the revenue that comes in to be able to pay the bills, and if you have zero revenue, at some point you've just got to say, we can't do this anymore. A quote from Maria Titano, the matriarch of the family-run business, who said, your resources have already been depleted. There are many other businesses crushed by their financial burdens that simply will walk away from their places of business. Bankruptcy attorney Gary Gumatauto said in a recent interview, among the hardest hit are food and beverage establishments. One bar owner hasn't had her business open for 91 days as of Sunday and would like to ask the governor when she can have her business back. You know how long the governor would like to keep the economy shut down, Real Joe Cruz?
Probably forever, sir.
Forever, yeah. Unlike some other small businesses, this bar owner would like to try to stay open, but with government restrictions, she can't. At Guam Premier Outlets, a usually busy shopping center in better days, a liquidation sale was announced, a bellwether that yet more businesses have been driven to the ground. Some of the items being sold in the liquidation sale are from now shuttered Forever 21 fashion store. Even with a name like Forever 21, they couldn't make it, Real Joe Cruz.
Sad, sir.
While many Forever 21 stores across the nation were already destined to close even before the pandemic hit, the plan was to keep the Guam store open. It had an edge over its stateside counterparts with a steady stream of local shoppers and many tourists from Japan and South Korea. Forever 21's Guam store was supposed to survive its parent company's bankruptcy organization, but then the Wuhan virus hit. Any hope that remained for the Guam store vanished. One of the biggest indicators that things are not all right, even when businesses are allowed to reopen, is the sad state of near emptiness in Tumum Bay. There are no tourists around. Hotel lobbies are either closed or echo their emptiness from lack of activity. On a given day, before the pandemic, we were used to thousands of tourists out and about, shopping, dining, lounging, and hopping on and off tour buses. We saw 1.6 million tourists last year. The projection for this year, I think he might come. That's the projection. He might come. Maybe he'll bring his wife, and that's about it. Next year, we might get 1 million tourists, said new tourism czar and former Governor Carl Gutierrez. That's still worrisome. That's at least a 30% drop. The majority of our tourists come from Japan and South Korea with a requirement that they stay in quarantine in their home countries for 14 days upon return from their travel. Coming to Guam for a vacation lasting just a few days doesn't make sense to them. So our tourist industry, on which more than 20,000 workers rely for their livelihood, is on hold, and so are its jobs. Now, in spite of these factors, just to name a few, the actions we're seeing from elected officials do not seem to match the gravity of the situation for the private sector and the people and families affected by its challenges. The fight for survival in the private sector hasn't been matched with belt-tightening in Gov Guam or well thought out plans. No belt tightening in Gov Guam. In fact, I suspect people are looking around for larger belts. Instead, Gov Guam's discussions have centered on more policies to benefit the Gov Guam community. Double pay, more options for health insurance, hiring more people. Gillette Leon Guerrero, Michelle Paris, 39 people at the Department of Labor, on and on. I'm not even going to mention, Real Joe Cruz, are you ready for this?
I am, sir.
I'm only going to just mention the 19th floor.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Let me try it again. I'm only going to just mention the 19th floor. Yeah. By the way, I saw the movie The Usual Suspects a couple nights ago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I think I found out where Kaiser Soze went after the movie.
Where did he go?
Guess where?
Where?
The 19th floor.
And like that, he was gone.
Yeah, he just disappeared. He's probably up there with Jimmy Hoffa and Elvis and, those kinds of folks. All right. So the government, instead of concerning itself with the dire straits that the population are in, centered its policies on double pay, more options for health insurance, hiring more people, etc. Many elected officials' moves have centered around the welfare of Gov Guam employees and retirees. We desperately need government officials who can truly lead. Okay, well, that's a pretty good editorial, so we'll give the coveted blue star to the Post today. That takes the Post up to 203 blue stars compared to the Daily News' 57. Now, I have another column that I'm going to read that makes a really good point about the media in general. It's going to take a minute to get there, but I think it's right on point. This is from a newspaper called the Remnant Newspaper. It's by a guy named Michael Matt, who's not a stranger to some of our folks out there in the international radio listening audience. In a span of, and the title of this article is A Tale of Two Murders. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, anyhow. In a span of nearly 9 minutes, George Floyd, arrested for allegedly using a forged $20 bill, was suffocated to death by a police officer. According to the Wall Street Journal, the officer had 18 previous complaints filed against him, resulting in only 2 letters of reprimand. Where was the investigation on how he was allowed to continue? Where is Vice President contender Amy Klobuchar? By the way, this, of course, happened in Minneapolis that has a Democrat governor, Amy Klobuchar, who was a Democrat district attorney. There's a Democrat mayor of Minneapolis, and on and on and on. The interesting thing about Minnesota, though, is they try to fool you. You know, they know that people in the United States know what it means to be a Democrat, so they don't call themselves Democrat. They call themselves DFL. DFL in Minnesota stands for the Democrat Farmer Labor Party. Maybe they figure if they add in farmer and labor, you'll forget about all of the bad stuff that the Democrats have done. Kind of a deception plan. This officer had obviously had a documented history of issues, and not dismissing him as city leaders sharing some responsibility. But of course, that doesn't fit into the leftist agenda. Such reprehensible conduct does not justify the ensuing nationwide rioting and looting that followed and put the kibosh on social distancing, with no one claiming to be positive for Wuhan virus. The rioters were so outraged that they stole flat-screen TVs, clothing, and whatever else that was available. Who knew the cure? The cure was good old-fashioned rioting, but with face masks, naturally. Rioting is acceptable provided we don't do something truly outrageous like assemble to pray, go to a gym, or get a haircut. Initially, people were united in their disgust over Floyd's death until the protest turned violent and changed the account to the consequences of lawless violence where prejudice and anarchy reign. The Lincoln and World War II memorials were defaced with graffiti. That included New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral. The Centers for Disease Control has advised that looting will be restricted to 50 vandals per business. Society would be better off if folks would just continue to shelter in place and riot from their basements. Despite the tragedy's spread, most of the protesters and their allies in the national media could care less about the groundless death of Floyd. In a striking contrast, it's a good bet that nearly all of these protesters know absolutely nothing of the unjustifiable death that occurred just 4 days later of another black man, Dave Underwood. Underwood served as an officer in the Department of Homeland Security's Federal Protective Service and was gunned down as he guarded the U.S. courthouse in Oakland. According to the FBI, Underwood was killed by an unidentified person shooting from a car. Where's the outrage over Underwood's unprovoked assassination? Underwood did not commit a felony, did not have meth and fentanyl in his system, and did not resist arrest. Maybe that's why no one paid any attention. Seems some black lives are more important than others, as Underwood's death is treated as collateral damage. A similar scenario occurred years ago in Staten Island when a black NYPD undercover cop was gunned down by black illegal arms dealers. Al Sharpton disregarded his murder while stirring up civil unrest over a criminal who was killed where the NYPD was found to have appropriately utilized deadly force. Underwood's death, and many like it, fails to promote the leftist narrative about American race relations. According to the CDC, police killings of blacks declined 80% from the late 60s through the 2010s, while police killings of whites have flatlined. Statistically, someone black has a 30-to-1 chance of being killed by another black, as opposed to a police officer, regardless of their race. Why confuse matters with the facts? It serves the leftist manifesto to keep the waters of truth muddy with distortion while making sure black folks believe they are purposely being targeted. Underwood died serving a cause much greater than him, so that even those who murdered him would still retain the right of due process. Such heroism is dismissed and outright ignored, especially throughout the media. Yeah, the media. The most abused power of the media is their willful disregard of such worthy news stories. Poor and malicious journalism only invites ignorance, hatred, and prejudice. Yet news organizations wonder why readership is sinking faster than the Titanic. Such hypocrisy by the mainstream media, their political allies, and the self-righteous who believe they are the arbiters of injustice only further divides the nation. So, it's no wonder that Donald Trump invented a new term, fake news. Because once again, Real Joe Cruz, it's not only what the newspapers print, but what they
don't print.
Exactly. Where's Sherlock Holmes when we really need him? It's not what the newspapers say, it's what they don't say. Democrats' failure to use proven police tactics to stop the mayhem is about not turning on their voter base. They are complicit in trashing their own cities, harming the very people they claim to represent. When do the Democrat mayors resign out of sheer incompetence for letting their cities be looted and burned? Much progress has been made in providing all Americans a voice. America is still the light among the world's nations, but that light is flickering when we willfully choose to ignore the reality of what's transpiring within our republic. That's the newspapers for you, the media. And you're right in there with them, Daily News. Not printing even editorials. And of course, it was just a few days ago I went through the travesty of how the newsroom at the New York Times did a hostile takeover of the editorial policy of the paper. So it's tough. Okay, so we go from Zemi Ikotny to the card. And this is what I've got on the card for today. Of course, I've got Troy versus Janela, Tina versus Emergency. Tina is all the way up to 4 days now. That crackerjack reporter Joan Ogden-Chotfers versus Irrelevance. The Tall Tales Crystal Ball versus Black Lives Matter. Jim Moylan versus Frank Miller. Joni Kanga Kerr versus Michael San Nicolas. Woke Gem versus Minneapolis plus the universities. Alabama versus Gods and Arrows. And I think if I can get that far today, it'll be interesting. Okay, starting out with Troy versus Janela, I think you're all aware that, I was going to tell you about Troy versus Janela, but the Real Joe Cruz.
It's a break.
The Real Joe Cruz is muting my microphone.
No, sir, I would never do that.
Tell me I can't keep talking because we got to take a break. Will the Real Janela Carrera please stand up? All right, we'll take a short break here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers but branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, you can talk now, sir.
Yeah, you can't. Perhaps you can't see me out there in an international radio listening audience, but I'm raising my hand. Okay, now
It's okay. I got a message from Janella saying it's okay. Go ahead and unmute the mic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Janella. Yeah. So Janella muted the mic, cut off some reporters at the governor's press conference. The lieutenant governor apologized, said that Carlo Branch and Janella should apologize. Carlo did. Janella never did. Troy was on her every single day until finally Crystal Paco San Augustine issued this statement. Carlo Branch has publicly stated that he directed Ms. Carrera's actions that day, and the lieutenant governor is satisfied that he has taken full responsibility. As the responsible party, the apology was solely his to make. It has been made abundantly clear that this situation will not be repeated. Well, just to make sure that that situation will not be repeated, we're keeping an eye and an ear on Ms. Carrera. And I can tell you that it's been 30 days now since the Paco rejoined her, and Janella has not muted or cut off any reporters. Okay, next we have Tina Rose Munya Barnes and emergencies. And you'll recall that Tina really distinguished herself by declaring calling an emergency session of the legislature to discuss 3 double pay bills, and then because there was a danger to the public health or public health or safety, said that the 3 bills didn't need to have public hearings. She certified that emergency, no public hearings. The legislature met the next day, and the sponsor of one of the bills, Joe San Augustine, asked the legislature to adjourn so that the 3 bills could have a public hearing. Nice emergency, Tina. So, but she did it again on, let's see, what day was that? On June 10th, as you were, June 11th, Bill 367, the public hearing requirement was once again waived by Tina Rose Munya Barnes. So once again, I don't think anybody even felt it. It's like one of those earthquakes that's so small that you kind of know what's going on, but you wonder, is it me or was there an earthquake? Am I just a little shaky? And you say to the person in the next room, "Oh, hey, Real Joe Cruz, was there just an earthquake?"
Mongat.
And the real Joe Cruz is going to say, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, so she did it again. So that's 4 times in about a month that she spotted these emergencies. I don't know how scared we should be, these emergencies dealing with health and safety, so we can't have public hearings. I suppose it's all in the name of transparency. Okay. Then we go on to this dynamite news story by Joan Ogun-Chatfaris. Senator wants island-wide beautification task force scope expanded. And the dynamite news here is that Senator Kelly Marsh Titano wrote a letter to the lieutenant governor. Wow. Yeah, that kind of excitement, I got to make sure I'm sitting down when I read something like this. And the next item on the card is the Tall Tales Crystal Ball versus Black Lives Matter. I didn't get to it last week, but on the 12th of July, let's see, would that have been Friday, Ruth? Yeah, that was Friday, right? On Friday, I had this item on the card. It was Starbucks versus Black Lives Matter. The title was Starbucks Tells Employees They Cannot Wear Black Lives Matter Attire at Work. An internal memo says that the coffee chain told its employees they may only wear buttons or pins issued to the partners by Starbucks for special recognition or for advertising a Starbucks-sponsored event or promotion. The memo said, and one reasonably sized and placed button or pin that identifies a particular labor organization or partner support for that organization, except if it interferes with safety or threatens to harm customer relations or otherwise unreasonably interferes with Starbucks' public image. Partners are not permitted to wear buttons or pins that advocate a political, religious, or personal issue. The memo notes that employees had asked if they could wear Black Lives Matter gear. The company's vice president of inclusion and diversity. Now there's a job for you. Do we have a vice president of inclusion and diversity here, Real Joe Cruz?
I don't think so, sir.
Wow. Do you think we need one?
I don't think we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we diverse?
We're diverse. We're all inclusive, sir.
Yeah.
All are welcome.
All are welcome. Or at least tolerated, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Starbucks has a vice president of inclusion and diversity. His name is Zing, Z-I-N-G, Zing Shaw. Oh, Zing Shaw. That sounds pretty diverse too, doesn't it?
It's got a zing to it.
It does. Zing Shaw said that Black Lives Matter gear does not fit in the dress code because there are agitators who misconstrue the fundamental principles of the Black Lives movement. I think I probably don't understand. I misconstrue the fundamental principles myself. But of course, I don't work at Starbucks. And he said in certain circumstances, intentionally repurpose them to amplify divisiveness. The memo comes as protest against racism and police brutality erupted around the country in the George Floyd's death. So Starbucks says you guys cannot wear any Black Lives Matter buttons on your uniform. I guess maybe that's the kind of thinking that underlies the word uniform, right? Uniform means,
yes, sir.
Yeah, they're all the same. If everybody gets to choose his own uniform,
it's not a uniform yet.
It's not it's not uniform, and of course they are not uniforms. So I could understand that, but when I read this, I said, no, I didn't even. I had to just peek in my crystal ball, and I said, I'll give it 3 days, and Starbucks will cave. 3 days. And what do I have here from the 13th, which is the next day? Starbucks reverses stance, will allow employees to wear clothes supporting Black Lives Matter. Starbucks on Friday reversed its stance, barring employees from wearing clothes that supports the Black Lives Matter movement. Quote, "We see you. We hear you. Black Lives Matter. That's a fact and will never change." So I'm so happy for Starbucks, that they're supporting the Black Lives movement. And I hope that, I want to get the news here to Dr. Tom Shea and Mariana Cook-Hoyne, who led the White Coats for Black Lives Matter demonstration here on Guam, so that they would now know the next time they're in the mainland, it's okay to go to Starbucks. Before Starbucks reversed itself on that uniform matter, I don't think it would not be very woke to go to Starbucks, even though when it comes to coffee, there's nothing more woke than Starbucks, right, Real Joe Cruz?
You got that right, sir.
Yeah. You know, they did an experiment in Seattle, which is where Starbucks came from, and they took the dishwater from out in the kitchen, and they put it in really snazzy little bottles, and they advertised it, drink Starbucks dishwater, and they charged $3 a bottle for their dishwater, and it sold like hotcakes. So
Is that what you call useful idiots, sir?
Well, I don't know how useful they are. Yeah.
Well, they're buying the product.
I guess. So I think the bottom line here is that Starbucks is so woke that people would rather drink dishwater from Starbucks than real coffee from some other vendor that is not anywhere near as woke as Starbucks. So it was a real surprise to see that as the bandwagon kind of rolled by the Starbucks store, that Mr. Starbuck wasn't out there climbing on top of it immediately. But, you know, they got it right finally. Okay, next item on the card here. We've got Joan Ogunchatvris versus Irrelevance. And I spent a little time on this one the other day. Coalition calls attention to long-standing issue of injustice. And I tried to be a little bit instructive here. And there's one sentence in this story that really tells you what I think the key issue is here. The process of decolonization has been long delayed by federal interference, most notably the Dave Davis case, which has confused the issue, giving the appearance that Chamorro self-determination is an issue of constitutionality and not about human rights and justice. So, you know, first of all, the federal interference. How dare the federal government setting up a court system, setting up an independent judiciary, one part of which is called the District Court of Guam, setting that up, an independent judiciary where we have a trial court here, appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco, and the opportunity to petition the Supreme Court of the United States to hear our causes. So this is interference. How dare the United States set that system, put that system together just to interfere with Chamorro self-determination? Where is Greta Thunberg now that we need her? What would Greta Thunberg say about this, Real Joe Cruz?
How dare you?
Yeah, how dare you, federal government, set up that court system just to interfere with Joni Kanga Kerr and her gang. How dare you? So Joni goes on to say that that horrible federal interference confused the issue, giving the appearance that Chamorro self-determination is an issue of constitutionality and not about human rights and justice. Well, any fool knows that if you got a stubby pencil and a couple of pieces of paper, you could sit down and write on that piece of paper, because the Chamorros haven't had the ability to engage in what they refer to as self-determination. It's a violation of human rights and an injustice. And then on the bottom, you sign it, Joni Kanga Kerr and others. And then you put a place there, please order, court, dear Francis, please order that Chamorro have their right of self-determination, and you take that over and you submit it to the district court, and instead of horsing around with stuff like the United States Constitution, the laws, the rules of civil procedure, the judge ought to just take that and put down there, write her answer and sign it, and that should be it. That should be all there is to it. Because what's more important, constitutionality or human rights and justice? Well, obviously, human rights and justice are. So I explained to Joni Kanga-Kerr and the others that the answer you got is exactly in line with the question you ask. It's funny, kind of like how life is like that, right? The answer you get pretty much depends on the question you ask. So if I said to the real Joe Cruz, what would you like for dinner, real Joe Cruz? I wouldn't expect him to say 10 gallons of gasoline. Right, real Joe Cruz?
No, sir. Steak and lobster, please.
Yeah, well, see, there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, now if I asked you, what do you need for your car, real Joe Cruz? And he said 10 gallons of gasoline, that would fit. But the answer you get depends on the question you ask. Well, the way this issue came before the court, no, the ideas of human rights and justice were not framed. The government of Guam, which Joni thinks is supposed to carry water for Chamorro self-determination, tried to finesse the case, and the government of Guam's position was, well, it really isn't a vote, so it doesn't count. And it really isn't about Chamorros, it's about people who became citizens because of the Organic Act. Well, if you want to take it into the human rights and justice and self-determination framework, then the question that you need to ask or the issue that you need to push, and I've said this before, you need to take this position. There is a discrete group of people in the United States who are called Chamorros. And they are an identifiable group. And because of the way history turned out, this group is now living in the unincorporated, most of them, well, some of them are living in an unincorporated territory of the United States. And they have, because they are this group that never had that chance, they have a right, I suppose under the Constitution, to determine what their status should be. But that isn't the question that the government of Guam brought before the courts. That isn't the question. And in order to answer that question, then the court would have to go through this mental exercise. Yes, there is a distinct, identifiable group of people called Chamorros. No, we all know that Chamorros live on Guam. There are more Chamorros living in the mainland than live here. So I suppose if you're going to be fair, you have to include all Chamorros together because it's not a geographic determination. It's a jus sanguinis determination, a blood determination. So once you decide that there is a group like that, then you let them. Well, let me take a short break here, and I'll come back to Joni Kanga-Kerr.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
As we emerge from the effects of the global pandemic, Security Title is rethinking how to best serve our customers. With our houses clean and closets reorganized, here's a reminder to take a look at the title to your house and other real estate. Is your trust in order? Is it time to update your wills? Do you have the best interest rate available on your home? As we get back to work, there's no better time to revisit your most valuable asset, your property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. They are open in Hagåtña and Tumon, and they're ready for you to have your dine-in experience. Necessary precautions and safety protocols were assessed in order to maintain a clean and sanitized area for you and your family while dining in. Join Mezcla in Hagåtña and Tumon locations for a true taste of Guam.
Okay, here we go again. We got about 8 more minutes till that big halftime show, and I'm back with Joni Kanga-Kerr versus Michael San Nicolas. So if Joni and her gang were able to get the United States government to recognize the existence of that group called Chamorros, the next thing that Joni wants is she wants the territorial government to participate in assisting that group to determine what political status they like. Now, of course, the territorial government is the colonizer's government. And if you find yourself working for the colonizer's government, you're probably a quisling. If you don't know what that word means, Quisling, a quisling. You're working for their government. So, backing up a second, once that group identifies itself, it doesn't need anyone's help to determine what political status it wants. However it wants to do it, fine, do it. But then the next step is this. Let's say that that group is able to get a judicial ruling, saying that either the territorial government or the national government should conduct some sort of a vote determining what political status the Chamorros want. And let's say the Chamorros determined that they wanted independence. What happens next? So this group then becomes an independent state. One of the sine qua nons of a state is geographical. You have to have some territory. There's a couple of very small exceptions that I'm not going to get into. The Knights of, I believe it's the Knights of Malta, Knights Templar. But anyhow, so does it then follow that if that group called Chamorros determines that they want to be independent, does that then affect the political position of an island called Guam? Does Guam then become the independent realm of that group called Chamorros to the exclusion of all other interests? Is that what you're after? Because if it is, then you're not going to get there through the U.S. judicial system, because it's not confusion when a United States court decides a case based on the Constitution. It always happens that way. That's why we have courts. Okay, so I brought this back because I hadn't quite finished my explanation, and I think it's extremely important to do that. But the reason I brought it back is that Joni Kanga-Kerr and her gang were beating up on somebody. And this is what they said: in hopes of reminding our elected leaders of the need to address this long-standing issue of local justice. And I don't know how you could call it local justice. When you're talking about the independence of Guam, you're talking about an international matter, because you can't be a sovereign nation unless other countries recognize you as a sovereign nation. So then she goes on to say, last month we wrote a letter to Imagahagan Guahan, all 15 members of Legislatura in Guahan, and Guam's current non-voting delegate to the House. In this letter, the coalition called on them to affirm their support for the right of the Chamorro people to self-determination. Are you standing, Real Joe Cruz? You probably
No, sir, I'm not that short.
Good point.
Should I?
Yeah, you should have been. Okay, now I can tell you're standing up. Okay. In response, Imagahaga Guahan, Lulian Guerrero, Speaker of the Legislature in Guahan, Tina Muñoz Barnes, Senators Kelly Marsh, Taitano, Tello Taitigui, and Therese Terlahi all wrote statements expressing their full support. Whoa. Their full support. A survey was provided to the remaining 11 senators asking for their stance. The remaining 11 senators all answered Hungan, affirming their support. Hungan means yes in Chamorro. At present, despite several letters, emails, and calls, Congressman Michael San Nicolas is the sole elected leader of Guam, not Guam, but Guam, who has not affirmed his support for the rights of the Chamorro people. Boy, that Michael San Nicolas. What a guy. Where is that Michael San Nicolas? You know? You got any eggs, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir. Tomatoes.
Tomatoes? Are they rotten? Just wait till that guy comes back here. I'm going to save up all our rotten tomatoes and eggs and anyhow. So he did not affirm his support for the rights of the Chamorro people. That's just shocking. Well, on the 14th of June, a story ran in the Post. San Nicolas clears record on self-determination stance. I'm going to keep you in suspense as to what Michael's stance is until right after that big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
40 minutes. Fox News. I'm Mary Corsetti. That's how long a largely peaceful encounter lasted before turning violent. Atlanta police say the department has fired Officer Garrett Rolfe and taken Officer Devin Bronsnan off patrol duty after police video shows the fatal shooting of a black man during a sobriety check in Atlanta Friday. This as protests continue for the killing of George Floyd. Floyd's family attorney Benjamin Crump speaking on what he wants going forward.
We need transparency plus accountability, and that's how we can get to trust between communities of color and police in America, because we don't want it to be two justice systems in America, one for black America and one for white America.
And that's what protesters are asking for in Washington, D.C., as they carried on demonstrations near the White House last night. Fox's David Spunt reports.
Mayor Muriel Bowser, definitely hundreds flocked to her Northwest home last night. A lot of people dancing in the streets. Some people called it somewhat of a light atmosphere to talk about defunding the police. That is a big issue here in Washington, D.C., not only in Washington, D.C., but really on a national national scale. Tomorrow night, the local D.C. City Council is going to be talking about the budget for next year as far as the police department is concerned. Already several hundred people have signed up to talk about defunding the police.
Well, the CEO of a cosmetics company is apologizing after a video shows her and her husband threatening to call the police on a man because he wrote Black Lives Matter in chalk on his property in San Francisco. The video has sparked accusations of racism and even led a cosmetics distributor to cut ties with Lisa Alexander, founder and CEO of LaFace Skincare. Alexander said she's sorry for being disrespectful and should have minded her own business. America is listening to Fox News.
Oro makunom, matana lom suman kumin healthy and niceness. Karingin kum niki mitsaye nakshi kesin zinkinyen fashil klan ma sayinge. Inwang takayani and wang na pashali, matana lom suman. Akayakom, ace mongle, ashosh, kamofal, esukumines be vitamin nasum. Karingin kum sifena in niceness in tia apashali. O about the kungum somnayen, tia kalmotom, infame, inwelum, eaknas yen kumatakyan. Inaksafye akola. Arela emergency contact list lom, aroy nash mo yaknas ko onlo in nomsuman, nakarangin in jash mit masin nomsuman. Aro makuno minako ye aknas yen kuam in niceness aim safe. Nanakmanas, matana in nomsuman. Message saying ye masin manyetlu, Micronesian Research Center at Choice Broadcasting.
President Trump will hold his first campaign rally in 3 months next Saturday. Fox's Mark Meredith has the details.
The president is set to hold a campaign rally, the first since early March. Later on next weekend, it's going to be happening Saturday night in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are hearing from the president's campaign manager as they get ready for what they say will be a big demand for the event. They say online, quote, just passed 800,000 tickets, biggest data haul and rally sign-up of all time by 10. Saturday is going to be amazing. However, the campaign is telling supporters that they'll have to sign a waiver to make sure that even though that they are going to an event like this, they realize it's possible that they could be exposed to coronavirus.
Health experts are questioning President Trump's decision to hold the rally, citing the danger of infection spreading in the crowd and sparking outbreaks when people return to their homes. The COVID-19 case numbers in Oklahoma are low but rising, and the worry from health experts applies to other states as well as reopening of businesses continue across the country. Fox's Christina Coleman reports from Los Angeles.
New outbreaks in the South and here in the West is concerning medical experts as more and more quarantine restrictions are lifted nationwide. There's also thousands of people gathering for protests in close proximity of each other, which could spread the virus. And we're just days away from the July 4th holiday, which could lead to more large groups of people gathering, as some did on Memorial Day weekend. This week, again, those numbers of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. climbing to more than 2 million. And as of today, there's been more than 115,000 deaths. Texas is seeing a spike in COVID-19 hospitalizations, mostly in the Houston and Austin areas. And hospital officials in Arizona this week were urged to activate emergency plans to cope with a surge in COVID-19 patients.
And in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo said hospitalization numbers are the lowest ever since the pandemic began. I'm Mary Corsetti, and this is Fox News.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Haggadah and Tumon are now open for takeout and free delivery services in selected locations. For more information, call 479-2652 or 3 or 969-2652. Open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comforts of your own home. They take your favorite local dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Hooray! Horizon Properties can empathize with individual property owners during this trying time. The last thing you should worry about is collecting rent or sending a repairman to your property. With their web-hosted property management system, Horizon can reach out to tenants, vendors, and owners alike and maintain the current prohibition requirements. Let Horizon Properties take care of it all. Help flatten the curve by remaining safe at home. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792 or visit HorizonPropertiesGuam.com. Horizon Properties, always there for you.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
"11 Cannons, boom, 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 boom." It's a great show. Okay, before the halftime show, I told you that Michael St. Nicholas had stepped in and is answering back Joni Kanga Kerr and a group of 35 different municipal organizations who polled all of the senators and the governor, and they all said they're for Chamorro self-determination. But that Michael St. Nicholas never answered at all. Well, I have an article from the Post in front of me that says, St. Nicholas clears record on self-determination stance. A letter from a local organization called out Delegate Michael St. Nicholas, saying he's the only elected leader of Guam who has not affirmed his support for the rights of the Chamorro people. Boy, I don't know. We got any tar and feathers around here anywhere?
No, sir.
No.
Wait, let me do this so they know.
Thank you, Real Joe Cruz. Just by way of explanation for folks who haven't been listening a lot, there are occasions when I lapse into facetiousness, exaggeration, sarcasm, and sometimes members of our international radio listening audience have taken me literally when I go into those various places. So the Real Joe Cruz, as he detects those, will signal that it's facetious, sarcastic, exaggeration, etc. by how, Real Joe Cruz? Now, unfortunately, or the reason that this is necessary is because there are subtleties to the things that I say into the microphone here on Tall Tales. Remember, the name of the program is, after all, Tall Tales. But there are times when the subtlety is of a degree that even the Real Joe Cruz doesn't catch the subtlety.
This is true, sir.
So I suppose the saving factor here is make sure you, when you're listening to Tall Tales, always have a good size grain of salt handy, so that when you hear something that sounds as though it's over the top, it probably is. Okay, so anyhow, Joni Kanga, Joni Kanga Kerr called out Delegate Michael St. Nicholas, saying he is the only elected leader of Guam who has not affirmed his support for the rights of the Chamorro people. I don't know, tar and feathers, maybe that's too extreme. You remember, you've seen these old movies of colonial New England where they, in the town square, they had a stock.
Yes.
And you put your head in it.
And your hands.
Yeah, and your wrists, and it closes down, and you're sitting. Maybe first offense, we'll just put them in the stock.
Okay.
Not tar and feather right off the bat. Give them a chance, right?
I hear you, sir.
Yeah. And then St. Nicholas said, he responded to the Finogi Coalition, and again for the Tautosia no Titungo y Palabran Finogi, Finogi Kameki Eleknya Stand, Gifino English. So if you hear someone say Finogi tomorrow, it means stand tomorrow. So the Finogi Coalition stated, St. Nicholas responded to the Finogi Coalition after they called him out for not supporting the rights of Chamorro people. St. Nicholas said, "Of course I support the rights of Chamorro people." In a letter sent to the media on Thursday, the coalition, whose aim is to promote the right of the Chamorro people to choose the political status of the territory. Now, this is something new, post-Guam, to choose the political status of the territory or choose the political status of the Chamorro people. It's not the same thing, you know. You got to be very clear on stuff like this. The coalition, whose aim is to promote the right of the Chamorro people to choose the political status of the territory, stated the governor and all 15 senators of the legislature had gone on record in support of self-determination. Well, there's a contradiction right there. Self-determination, that's Chamorro people. Political status of the territory, that's not self-determination. But going back to the media and that piece I read, this is a big part of the problem. That people who write about this stuff don't know what they're writing about, and they lead to an awful lot of confusion because they don't. I think probably what we need to do is get, what was her name? We need to get Joan Ogunchotfris handling this stuff. Incisive reporter.
Put her on the case.
Yeah, put Joan Ogunchotfris on it, man. Then it would be as clear as a bell. The group wrote that Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and 4 senators wrote statements expressing their support. The other 11 senators responded in the affirmative when surveyed by the group on whether they supported self-determination for the Chamorro people. Well, here we go. Is it self-determination for the Chamorro people? Or is it choosing the political status of the territory? Bad. I'm going to grade this article right now. I'm going to give them an F-. This is the Post. F- Post. The group wrote, as you were. So they repeated the old news. According to the congressman, he has already made his position clear. Gifino tomorrow night? Already night? Here's a quote, "As for self-determination, I am already on record that the question of Guam's political status should be put before all of the people of Guam as a future predicated on everyone should not begin by excluding anyone," he wrote. So Michael understands. Michael's talking about the political status of Guam. As a Chamorro, I am confident that my fellow islanders who call Guam home will make the best choice for Guam's political future alongside me. I trust all of the people of Guam. what is her name again?
Jonagan Chatfris.
Yeah, no, that's the crack reporter.
Kier.
Joni Kanga Kerr does not trust all the people of Guam. She only trusts Chamorros. It's a matter of trust. So St. Nicholas said, I trust all of the people of Guam. So that's a kind of a refreshing difference, isn't it? According to the Finogi Coalition, more than 2,000 people joined a march to support their mission last September. Native inhabitants of Guam were allowed to vote on the political status, independence, free association, or state of the territory under the 2000 plebiscite law. No, that wasn't what it was about. It was not about the political status of the territory. However, the night, and of course, no vote was ever conducted. How many times can you get it wrong in one story? Maybe I was too generous. Maybe I shouldn't cast aside that tar and feather so quickly. That vote was never conducted. However, the Ninth Circuit Court ruled Guam cannot hold a vote solely for Native inhabitants on the island political status, stating it would violate the U.S. Constitution by excluding specific races from voting. So I don't know which is the more noteworthy. The idea that Joan Ugan Chatfris and the Finogi Chamorro people don't understand that if you go to the colonizer's court, you're going to get the answer to the question that the colonizer sees. Or that's pretty noteworthy, but the fact that a daily newspaper can bollocks up an important story so bad as this, it's right out of that Michael Madd editorial that I wrote a little while ago. And it is a cause for a certain chagrin. You know, I've said many, many times, I've said, when it comes to self-determination, when it comes to the desires of the Chamorro people, I would be interested in finding out what it is that the Chamorros, that group, what they prefer. I'm not so sure I want to pay for it, but I would be interested in that. I'd be interested, of course, in finding out how other people on the island feel about it too. I think I know. But to take the mechanism of the territory and bend it to the desires of one single group, that's classic identity politics. Is it neo-Marxist? Yes, it's classic identity politics. And I know that because it is classic identity politics, Michael San Nicolas might just as well have said, I am not in favor of Chamorro self-determination. I am not in favor of Chamorros determining the political status of the territory. He might as well have said that as saying, I want everybody to vote. Because to the Finogi Chamorro gang, it's the same thing. You cannot. You know, the question is always, or the matter is always stated like this. When it comes to Chamorro self-determination, the first question you have to answer is, who is the self? And the self is Chamorros. If you're not a Chamorro, you're not part of the self. So Michael cleared the record. Now, carrying it a little farther, if you look at the demographics involved, you know, less than 40% of the people are, quote, Chamorros. So if you're going to take a political position, which one is probably going to work better for you? Limiting yourself to Chamorros or saying, I want everybody to vote? Not to mention the fact that there are an abundance of Chamorros who wouldn't buy the Joni Kanga Kerr Finogi Guam storyline anyhow. But the reason I put this back on the calendar here is because Michael St. Nicholas is just not doing the right thing. 15 senators and the governor all come out and they give the right answer, the politically correct answer. And Michael St. Nicholas comes out and gives what I would call a popular Democratic answer. He should know better than that. You know, by saying that, people are just going to like what he has said. Okay, I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of the Finogi group and Joni Kanga Kerr. I hope not. It's a lot to talk about there. Okay, next I've got Jim Moylan versus Frank Miller. I'm not going to spend much time on that. You'll recall Jim Moylan versus Frank Miller. I went back to one of my favorite movies. I suppose that High Noon will be banned.
Probably, sir.
Yeah, that Netflix will not run High Noon anymore, Channel 39. Yeah. No more High Noon.
They disarmed our cartoons as well, and
yeah, no more Gone with the Wind, no more Blazing Saddles. I think what they did, I think they have an informant on the island here, and they said, find out what movies Bob likes, and we'll deep six every single one of them. Right.
Yeah. Erase them all.
Yeah. Erase.
Yeah. Erase.
Erase them all. Well, certainly High Noon cannot pass muster in this George Floyd era. You know how many black people there are in High Noon?
How many, sir?
None.
None.
Yeah. Obviously racist, right?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. All right, I got a phone call coming in here. It's our Carl. What a surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise, surprise. It's our Carl. Good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob and Real Joe Cruz.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, you really have a clever way of constructing your show, because I was getting ready to leave. I was parked in a supermarket parking lot, and you were ending the first half of the show, and the way you ended it, you were saying, I'll reveal what Michael St. Nicholas said at the start of the second half. I mean, I was sitting there in my car for all through the news. It's really clever, Bob. You held my interest. I mean, it was like watching one of those old action serial adventures, where there's someone hanging onto the edge of a cliff. And
yeah, right at the end.
Next time.
Yeah.
But, Michael St. Nicholas' comment, Congressman St. Nicholas' comment illustrates exactly why I voted for him and why I continue to support him, because he doesn't just go with the herd. He thinks independently. He's got his own opinion. You may agree, you may disagree, but he thinks for himself, and he doesn't stick his index finger in his mouth and then stick it up in the air and kind of figure, well, where's everybody? What do they want me to say? Or to ask people, what do you want me to say, and I'll say it. And I think the problem for the separatist group is not so much that that my mom's generation, my mom was here during the war, as were all her siblings. My mom and her generation, not so much what they, the method of how they chose their direction, with no plebiscite. It's the fact that they don't like the choice. They're not in power. That is the main thing. If they'd have somehow chosen another direction, it would have been totally okay. But they're trying to overturn my mom's and her generation's choice. And, they say they're modeling themselves after the independence movement of America, but no, not really. They're not modeling themselves after that. The independence movement of America, they made their choice based on elected representatives. It was an elected government. They didn't have a plebiscite. They elected people that they felt were competent and would come to the right decision.
And they didn't ask the British Parliament to send them money to have the plebiscite either.
No, they just went ahead and they did it. You know, so what they're interested in doing is overturning my mom's generation, the war generation, which lived through incredible brutality. And they just don't like the decision that my mom's generation made, you know. And if they, you know, they elected or they decided on certain people to be representatives in this whole matter, and the evidence that they agree with what was decided is there were no marches in the streets. If you want to see people who are upset with the direction that their colony is going, take a look at Hong Kong.
As a matter of fact, Carl,
people in the street.
As a matter of fact, it was the other way around. You know, school kids collected their pennies in the 1930s to send a couple of guys to Washington to lobby for statehood. And after the war, for citizenship. And after the war, that was the fundamental political issue, American citizenship. That's what whatever passed for demonstrations was all about, American citizenship. So there's a pretty good argument that we already had the plebiscite when the popular sense was we want to have a civil government and we want to be American citizens. I suspect that there were very few people who didn't go that route. The only one that I read about was Antonio Borja Wampat, who everybody knows, who in 1948 said, no, we should develop the economy first before we go for citizenship. But then when it came time for the famous so-called walkout, he had changed his mind, and he was one of the leaders for the walkout in favor of citizenship of the Organic Act.
Yeah, I call every day that went by without marches in the streets an unofficial plebiscite of my mom's generation. They were non-verbally making their wishes be known. And these were not passive people. I've mentioned in the past that I've seen pictures of them holding up placards and signs and burning,
George Tweed.
They were quite angry at George Tweed for some things he'd written in his book. They knew how to hold a protest. You know, and some people say, well, they were just indoctrinated. No, they knew when they didn't want something. My mom's generation knew how to get angry. The Chamorro people are not passive people when they're upset about something. And I've seen it up close. So I just wanted to state that. Michael St. Nicholas, that's why I voted for him. I tend to vote Republican, but I voted for Michael St. Nicholas because he is a disruptor. And we need disruptors who are not just holding hands and marching merrily over the cliff with everybody else, you know, and singing Kumbaya as they go over the edge.
You know, it looks like Michael St. Nicholas is not going to have a Republican challenger this fall.
Really?
Yeah. According to what's been in the papers, Will Castro is going to run.
Oh. I got your sarcasm.
Where are you there, Real Joe Cruz, with that? Yeah, there you go. All right.
There you go. But anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to chime in. I'm just speaking up for my mom, who is no longer here. She died in 2009. You know, I don't want her and her generation's choice overturned by people who are just not dissatisfied with the choice because they're not in power. And my wife, my Filipino wife, who worked almost 30 years paying taxes, working, voting, moving the island forward, and basically they want to shut her and tens of thousands of so-called outsiders and settlers out and not have a voice. And I will never support that. And I'm Chamorro.
So I think that
thank you for allowing me to chime in.
I think it's not so much a dissatisfaction with the choice, but as the dissatisfaction is with the choosers. It ought to be Finogi Chamorro, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe so.
Thanks for calling, our Carl.
Thank
Okay, I think it's about time for the 7th inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers put branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
So here we are, 7th inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago, and we went from Wrigley Field straight back to the heroic studios of Tall Tales right here in Upper Tumum. And before the 7th inning stretch, I was talking about an item on the card called Jim Moylan versus Frank Miller. I talked about this a little bit last week. Frank Miller, for you movie buffs, was a really bad guy in the movie High Noon. He was the guy that Gary Cooper sent away to the big house. He was pardoned. He came back to town, and he came back to town. He said when he was in the state prison that he was going to kill Will Kane. So he comes back, and there's a climactic gunfight in the streets of Hadleyville. I won't tell you who won the gunfight, but you can probably figure it out if Gary Cooper was in the movie. So that's what it's all about. And it showed that Will Kane, the Gary Cooper guy, was not going to be pushed around or backed down by anything. It was a true example of what it means to be courageous and brave. So that was the movie, and I tied that into Jim Moylan and his Bill 9, which he introduced at the beginning, Bill 9, obviously, of this legislature that would roll back the GRT from 5% to 4%. And he had a hard time getting it on for public hearing, and he'd been making noise for a long, long time. I want to take my bill to the floor. So last week, on Wednesday, they actually took his bill to the floor. So that was kind of like, Jim Moylan was Will Kane or Gary Cooper. And going to the floor, Joe St. Augustine was kind of like Frank Miller. So Jim's got his bill on the floor, and we'll pick it up there. We'll leave Hadleyville and go straight back to the legislature. This is what Jim Moylan said. Sabotage! That was how Senator Jim Moylan described the treatment of his tax rollback proposal at the hands of certain fellow lawmakers. After successfully placing the long pending legislation on the session agenda Wednesday morning, Moylan withdrew the bill that afternoon following a failed attempt to request time for revisions. Bill 9, Moylan's legislation, would have reverted the business privilege tax to 4%. Moylan later promised to introduce a new bill. But he said, obviously, I do need time to make amendments to this bill, and I feel it's unfair that I wasn't allowed that time, as I've seen my other colleagues were. So obviously, I feel I'm being sabotaged in this position. It's not fair. And therefore, I withdraw Bill 9-35. So they put his bill on, and then the first thing he does, he says, I want to have a recess so that I can draft up some amendments to my bill that's been laying around here for a year and a half. And I said, no, Jim, you can't have time. We're going to go forward with your bill, remember? You wanted to do that? So Jim comes back and on two different occasions says, it's not fair. It's not fair. So we take that back to Hadleyville, and the sequel to High Noon with the Jim Moylan interpretation of the story will be that the train comes in at high noon. Frank Miller gets off the train. He's walking down the main street of Hadleyville. Will Kane, played by Gary Cooper, strolls out on the street, and they're finally going to settle this. And as soon as they're out in the middle of the street, Will Kane says, Frank, time out. I didn't put any bullets in my gun. Can I have some time to put some bullets in my gun, and then we can come back to do what we were doing? Yeah. So Jim Moylan comes to High Noon, and he forgot his gun, and the analogy fits. When you go into the legislature, you're one of 5 Republicans, and the other 10 folks in the legislature are Democrats. They're not going to make it easy for you. And they're not going to make it easy for you to do something that is at cross purposes with their Democrat governor. So if you're going to call them out in the street, Jim Moylan, you better make sure that you're loaded. Don't call them out in the street and then expect them to be fair. I know I've been making a lot of noise about getting my bill on the floor. It's there now, but I'm not really ready. So can you let me have some time to do some amendments? Okay, this is not going to be a nice day for Jim Moylan. Next item on the card here is Woke Jim versus Minneapolis. And this goes to one of Jim's new creations. And it's entitled, it's a story that ran in the Post, New Measure Would Punish Hate Crimes. And once again, we have some really poor journalism. Hundreds of local residents took to the island's capital last week in solidarity with Black Lives Matter movement, joining protesters throughout the nation and the world. However, even though the movement's message rang loud locally, the island remains one of 8 jurisdictions in the United States without local laws against hate crimes. The implication here is something like, what the hell's wrong with us? We don't even have any laws against hate crimes like everybody else.
And we got the most hate per capita, sir.
Absolutely. So here we are. We are in the Michael San Nicolas position. Everybody else is doing it. What's wrong with us? Bill 365 proposes to fill that void, according to its author, James Moylan. The legislation penalizes bias-motivated crimes and mandates the police department to establish data and provide analysis. They're going to establish data? I think you usually collect data. If you say, we're going to establish data on that point, it sounds like you're going to make it up. We've got some data We have some data to back our position. We just made it today. We just took it out of the word processor. However, except in its general application, the bill does not appear to specifically address bias by law enforcement, a cornerstone of the recent protests. So once again, hey, you guys, the bandwagon's rolling by. How come Jim Moylan's not climbing on? While the bill and Moylan make note of the protests, Bill 365 appears geared more toward creating a basic framework for legislation addressing hate crime. The legislation would impose different penalty tiers. A person convicted of a petty misdemeanor for a crime motivated by race, gender identity, political affiliation, or other characteristics will be subject to a maximum of $10,000 fine and prison. You know, that's like jaywalking. So I guess you can imagine this. A black person or a white person is driving his car down the street, and a black person or a white person is standing on the sidewalk, sees the car coming and says, I'll show that guy, I'm going to jaywalk. He'll have to slow down. Hate crime, petty misdemeanor, $5,000, motivated by hate. The bill also allows for civil action to be taken against the perpetrator or their parents in the case of minors. And Jim goes on to say, I'm optimistic that this legislative body will have an open mind to this measure. An open mind? So open that a commenter like me would say it doesn't require an open mind, it requires mindlessness. Bill 365 assures that those who commit crimes where the motivation is the color of the victim's skin, etc., may face additional penalties, Moylan stated in his release. Carlo Branch, who can turn a phrase himself, speaking not as the governor's policy director, but as a longtime Democrat. So I guess there's more than one Carlo Branch. There's one Carlo Branch who's kind of like Janela's lawyer. So if Janela needs to apologize, Carlo will do the apology. He's also the governor's policy director. And if you watched, I can't remember which press conference, you saw Carlo kind of leaning over someone so he could get his 2 cents worth in. But then he's also a longtime Democrat. So this is the Carlo that's speaking here. Carlo, speaking not as the governor's policy director, but as a longtime Democrat, said the senator appeared to be bandwagoning on the movement. Hate crimes are a tragedy, and that's why they've been a federal crime for decades. Is it me, or does the good senator remind you of the guy who sees a crowd going in a popular direction and yells, "There go my people. I must follow them. I'm their leader"? To me, it's more like a crowd is going down the street for reasons of its own. Jim sees the crowd out there running down the street, runs like hell and gets out in front of them and says, "Hey, you guys, follow me." Okay, I have Bill 365 in front of me here, and let's just spend a little time parsing it. Here it goes. A person commits a bias-motivated crime if, by reason of the actual or perceived race, religion, color, ethnicity, physical, emotional, or developmental disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, political affiliation, national origin, job or occupation, or ancestry of another individual or group of individuals, color of his automobile, whether or not he has his shirt tucked in. Jim didn't miss much, did he? Race, religion, color, ethnicity, physical, emotional, or developmental disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, political affiliation, national origin, job or occupation, or ancestry of another individual or group of individuals. Boy. So if you are motivated by any one of those things when you commit a crime, then that brings you within the ambit of the legislation, and it's a perception. So as an example, if let's take religion, if a person is a Baptist, right, and a Methodist really doesn't like a Presbyterian really doesn't like Methodists, and he sees that Baptist and he says, you know, I've always hated Methodists. I'm going to beat you up. And he clobbers him. Well, there you go. He was perceived as a Methodist, even though he was a Baptist. That's how this very far-reaching bill is going to reach if it becomes law. And then if with that motivation he violates chapters 16, 19, 22, 25, 25A, 30, 34, 37, 40, 49, 52, 61, or 70 of 9 GCA, he has committed a hate crime. So let's take 40, chapter 40. That's robbery. So why does one person rob another one, real Joe Cruz? You know what robbery is, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's to deprive somebody of property.
Yeah, to take his property.
Forcefully.
Excuse me, to take their
property, yeah, forcefully.
Away from them, yeah. Yeah, so if a person is walking down the street, and let's see, the person is carrying a purse, they are carrying a purse. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. We need to go any farther than that. And I am a robber, right?
Yeah.
And I see that person, and I run up very quickly and bump into the person and grab that person's purse. Mm-hmm. I have committed robbery, right?
Yes, you have.
Yeah, robbery, depending on the amount involved, is at least a third-degree felony, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But if it turns out that I perceived them to be females and I really don't like females,
yeah,
because my mother was cruel to me when I was growing up, if I perceive them to be females, even though they really aren't, and it can be shown that as I was doing this, I said, "Take that, sister." I have committed a hate crime.
Yes, sir.
And if you commit a hate crime, then the penalty is enhanced. A felony takes you up to $20,000 and 20 years in prison. Now, if you just step back and think about this, would they be very happy because someone came along and bumped into them and stole their purse? No. No, that's not something that anyone looks forward to, right? Is it something that we should condone in our society?
Of course not.
It's something we should punish and discourage, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the reason is, I'll come back to this in just a second.
As we emerge from the effects of the global pandemic, Security Title is rethinking how to best serve our customers. With our houses clean and closets reorganized, here's a reminder to take a look at the title to your house and other real estate. Is your trust in order? Is it time to update your wills? Do you have the best interest rate available on your home? As we get back to work, there's no better time to revisit your most valuable asset, your property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
This Father's Day, be one of 7 lucky winners of Circle K's Ultimate Father's Day Package. Get a case of tomahawk steak, a bottle of whiskey, a case of beer, and a Bacchus beer bag. That's a $300 value. Purchase $25 or more in fuel, or any 6-pack or more of Miller Lite, Coors Light, or Blue Moon to receive an entry form. Tune in to The Ray Gibson Show on The Point for more ways to win. Winners will be announced on June 17. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com or any Circle K location for more details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, so here we are again. So the reason that we criminalize robbery, a couple of reasons. One, we protect, part of the function of our legal system and our society is to protect private property. And the second reason is that we don't want someone to get hurt in the process of a robbery. So let's go back to them and having the purse snatcher snatch their purse. So let's take it all the way to the conclusion. So the robber opens the purse, takes the money, goes out and buys drugs with it or whatever. Later on, he gets caught and goes to trial, and the district or the prosecution attempts to prosecute him for a hate crime, but he isn't able to put on sufficient evidence. And the jury comes back and convicts him of robbery, but not a hate crime robbery. So the victim, at the conclusion of the trial, was interviewed by a reporter who said, well, what do you think? And the victim said, you know, I'm so glad that it wasn't a hate crime. I feel so much better now. But did you get your money back? No. And didn't you have to go to the doctor because you were hurt in the scuffle? Yeah. But you're still happy? Yeah, it wasn't a hate crime. Now, James Parks here has been listening, has been paying attention here, and this is what James Parks says. If you kill someone, what difference does it make? To him, if you hate his guts, he is still dead, and prosecution of you will not make him any less dead. Neither will it bring him back. Any hate crime bill is no less than a sop. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, James. This is just virtue signaling, showing off, bandwagoning, all of those things that we really don't need in the tough times that we're in right now. So the virtue signaling comes in when you see James saying, by reason of actual or perceived race, religion, color, ethnicity, physical, emotional, or development. Jim's looking out for people. Jim cares about people. Jim is a very virtuous guy. No, Jim's a show-off. Okay, I've got Keith on the line here. Good afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, Bob. Actually, you stole half my thunder with that last 2 sentences about the virtue signaling. It's all about he or she who nominates the bill and shows, you know, the woke crowd that they care. But in other terms, why don't we just call this for what it is, which is wrong think.
What is it?
Wrong think.
Wrong think. Okay, we'll borrow a page from George Orwell and invent a term, huh? Wrong think.
Oh, we didn't invent it. That is a term that he used in his 1984 book.
Okay, but he
persecuted for thoughts.
Yeah, but he turned it inside out, right? Wrong think would be holding bad thoughts about the state, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But that's kind of where we are. You know, a crime, we have redefined crime, so it's not violating just mere violation, not just the mere elements of the crime that counts. It's your state of mind, and if you hate somebody, it is much worse.
Yeah, it's I don't know. As your example illustrates, if you're lying bleeding on the sidewalk, the reason why the person decided to beat you, I don't see why that should make a difference. It's not going to make you any better.
Yeah. I suppose we could prioritize ambulance service, you know? Hey, 911, there's a man laying on the ground outside. He was robbed and he was seriously hurt in the robbery. 911 operator says, did the robber hate him for one of the reasons? I don't know. Oh, okay, well, we'll send an ambulance when we get around to it. We got to prioritize.
Don't give them any ideas.
Okay, James.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for calling. Yeah, so Jim, very good, Jim. You really caught my eye here with your virtue signaling, and it's good. I never would have, you know, your camouflage has been removed. I never would have guessed that you were a wokester. What do you think happened to Jim Moylan?
I don't know, sir.
Yeah. Maybe he got so scared with the Bill 9, you know, when Frank Miller wouldn't let him take a time out to do amendments to his bill. And maybe he said, wow, I'm pretty frightened here. I've got to draft up a bill here that, you know, that deals with gender identity and sexual orientation and job or occupation, you know. Yeah, so here he is, James Moylan, the wokester. Nice going, Jim. We had such high hopes for you, and you turn out to be a wokester after all. I've got something else here that I want to get into that kind of ties into this whole idea of wokesters. I've only got 2 minutes. I guess I better save it tomorrow and just tell you that there's an article again about Alabamians among top traffickers of birds to Guam for illegal cockfighting. So the United States Attorney for U.S. Attorney Jay Town is investigating allegations of ongoing cockfighting activity, including trafficking of game birds to Guam. So it ain't over till it's over. And as far as being over, Tall Tales is over for another day. We'll see you tomorrow, 1600. See you then.